Okay, I call this meeting to order. It is 5:02 p.m. What is it? March 24th, 2021. This is the Advisory Water Committee, and this is our first meeting in person. So it's nice to see everybody. It's definitely different when you're in person. We just have a couple things on the agenda tonight. Let's go ahead and start with roll call. Looks like Mike, Philip, Thomas, and town staff is represented by Public Works Director Mr. Loberg, Town Clerk Ferguson, and Finance Officer Cindy Jones. Thank you for being here. Okay, do we have minutes? Were you able to? Oh, you did? Eek. When did you email those? Oh boy, I probably lost them somewhere in there. March, yeah, there it is. Minutes, I never even opened it, Thomas. But, oh no, you know, I did, I forgot, I did, and they're really great. I love the way you do the minutes. I love the way you do the minutes, yeah. It's just real concise, and yes, okay, I do remember reading these, and I did not see a problem with this. Anybody have any comments about the meeting? Can we have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 24th meeting? Do we have a second? Okay, any further discussion on this other than thank you, Thomas, and these are great? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? Okay, any opposed? Good deal. Okay, and we'll just get right into the regular business. The reason I put this ordinance on here is because it does deal with water taps, and I don't want people asking questions and that we're not all basically on the same page as to how this affects the moratorium. I did get one pretty strange email from a pretty active citizen who asked my opinion on how this is going to affect the moratorium, and I just suggested that he read the draft. So water taps, sewer tap is mentioned once in here, and then just water taps, I believe twice. Did everybody get a chance just to look this over?
Yeah, I attended the meeting last night, but I had to leave early. Did they approve those, or was that a draft resolution? What actually happened yesterday, as far as this ordinance is concerned?
This ordinance is a draft ordinance. It will be going to the Planning Commission for review and a recommendation to the board and back to the board on an agenda. Probably the first or second meeting in May would be when it'll come back before the board.
So it was read last night. Was there any discussion last night? Not at all.
No, this wasn't on the agenda last night.
Oh, I thought
it was the previous meeting, and the board referred it to Planning Commission.
Okay, great, thank you.
And of course, if you look at the second mentioning of the word of tap, you'll find that the effective date does state pretty clearly, notwithstanding the foregoing, the town shall not issue a CO for an accessory dwelling unit unless or until there is a repeal of the townwide water tap sale moratorium. So I think that's pretty clear. If anybody has any questions about that.
So the house, the 800 square feet thing is going to be on the same tab as the main house.
But they are not being sold a new tap unless and until the moratorium is lifted.
That means it's on, right? Okay. I didn't read it enough in detail, so maybe I just don't understand yet. But I thought it didn't say that you didn't have to run. You didn't have to have a new tap unless you, I guess, unless you want one. Is that what, or did I misunderstand that?
I believe you can run a line, but if I'm understanding it correctly, because of the moratorium, you can't run that line at this time. So nobody can just run that line out there without that the moratorium being lifted. And would that also be approval by the town?
Approval from the town to extend the line to an ADU if they were approved? Yes, it would be through the town and through the permitting process.
Any further discussion on that? Anybody out in the public? I'm not sure if that power's on, but you can figure it out.
So I'm Bill Brunner. I haven't read the draft ordinance, but my thought as the water committee might relate to this and back to the town is that the intent of the ADU movement is to increase housing available. And there's always been kind of an intent from the town to take money from tap sales and put it into capital improvements in the system. At least that's been lip service. And so it seems odd to me that there would be a movement to increase the use on the system by increasing the number of housing units in the town without that capital input for the system, because you're going to increase the load on the system. In fact, I know last time I was on the board, there was a discussion that in the water ordinance, commercial properties are allowed to have more than one building on a lot served by a tap. That was not extended to residential, and I argued that it should be changed and extended to residential as well, and got nowhere with the board. So I haven't gone back and looked at the code, the town code on the water ordinance, but I would expect to find a prohibition on more than one tap on a property, or more than one building hooked to a single tap on a property. So if they do change that to where they allow that to happen, I hope they clean up that water ordinance as well. But I think it speaks to the intent that has come before as far as this stuff goes. There's been an overlooking of people putting in accessory living units in town. It's been tolerated. There's a lot of them. Nobody's ever chased down. The codification of it, I thought, was that it was permitted to put a line to your garage and have a sink in the garage. But I don't think there's ever been a sanctioning in recent times of additional dwelling units onto the same tap. So like I say, just as it goes to the water thing, it's going to increase the load on the system. That's the intent. And it seems odd to not get the ante of a tap fee or something along that line. It's up to you guys. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. Suzanne.
I just want to, I don't know exactly how this ADU thing is going to pan out, but one thing I want you to consider is the size of the houses in Paonia. There are a lot of older homes that are very small. Some might only have one bathroom. So it's not like we're looking at McMansions here who are wanting to put ADUs on. In a way, I guess when people buy a home and it's small, that's what they've bought. But you know what? What if people want to maximize their property a little bit because they have a relation that wants to come and live with them, and their house is 832 square foot large with 1 bathroom and 2 bedrooms, and they want their mother-in-law to live with them. And I can see the concept of ADU fitting into that without really being a burden on the system, because how many taps do people, I mean, how many fixtures? You know, I'm wondering if we should be looking at in terms of fixtures. You know, you have people who live outside of town, and a lot of those out-of-town houses have much larger square footage. You know, they have more fixtures, they might be more modern as houses, and I guess my question is why, I mean, it's one concept that I don't think is being considered in the ADU thing, is how large is the residence that's actually there. And I believe that it should be done under special review. So it should be done on a case-by-case basis. So these factors can be considered when individual units are being proposed. So I just wanted to point that out as another way of looking at it. How many fixtures do you think a 3 lots property in town should be allowed, rather than based on the house? How many fixtures should be allowed per lot, you know, in town? And if someone has 3 lots and an 800 square foot house, why shouldn't they be able to put another fixture, you know, more fixtures on their properties in the form of an ADU? And I'm not speaking in favor of it or against it. I just want to put that thought out there. Thanks.
And just to clarify, when you say fixtures, you mean sink, tub? Yeah, okay. Just making sure I understand that.
I have a comment on that. So I don't live in Paonia. I live out of town, and I've had. We used to call these mother-in-law houses, but I'm sort of interested in the new lingo, the ADU or whatever it is. I think as family units are beginning to come together, older people are beginning to live with. I sponsored a mother-in-law for more than 12 years in a very similar situation. I had 1 tap. She had an outlying dwelling. And I think a lot of this depends on the intended use, personally. I think if the purpose of an 800 square foot building is to sponsor a family member, I think that's good for community at the end of the day. Bill's right. There may be some impact on the system, and one of the things we're going to try and do here is figure out, you know, what we can sponsor in terms of water use and what's out there. I think that's point 2. Point 3, my personal view is that these units probably should be allowed, but they should never be used as rental units. So I think it's a tricky problem. I'm not familiar with what special review means, but I think homeowners have, you know, some bit of a right if they want to build. I have an outbuilding where I live. It has a sink in it and also has a bathroom. The other thing we haven't talked about is the wastewater side of things, and I'm not sure how that's going to work. And that actually may be a much more difficult problem than water supply. So as far as I'm concerned, we'll see. I think we need to do some metrics on what the impacts might be of this. How many units are we talking about? Blah, blah, blah. So that'd be my stand, at least today. I think that's up for discussion. I think Airbnb rentals, I think long-term rentals should definitely be discouraged. There might need to be a family unit clause in there of some sort. I'm just not sure. I think that needs discussion.
If I may, I'd like to respond to Bill's and Suzanne's comments briefly. Bill, I think that, and it is up to us, I guess, up to town as far as how we want to, account for, like what a tap fee pays for, because it's my understanding that a tap fee is generally intended to cover the installation of the meter, bringing the lines out to maybe a new location, expanding infrastructure, that kind of thing. Whereas if a ADU is placed on somebody's existing lot, ostensibly they'd be paying for all of that, and so town would not incur any additional costs beyond the additional use, like the increased use on the system that we would expect from the additional property. Shaking your head no?
So Corinne just reminded me, if you're going to be talking, you need to talk in it. And we don't want to get too far off track here. We want to keep it related to water, so you're good. Yeah.
Put your mic.
I think the tap fee relates to the entire capital system, not just the meter pipe. And the intent, as I understand it, of this ordinance is not to allow mother-in-law houses, it's to alleviate the housing shortage in Paonia. So.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, if I can get to Suzanne's comment about fixtures, there are some municipalities that measure water use by fixtures and have certain, like their base rates are set up on the, okay, you have so many washing machines, or like, you have so many bathtubs or whatnot. From what I've read, they tend to be fairly cumbersome. And since we have a fully metered system, it's my opinion that we should base our costs more on use rather than intended use or classification of a building, so that, for example, I'm gonna use myself, and I get to talk about my own little water debacle, but I pay 2 separate base rates, 2 separate water fees. I have 1 physical meter, and even though my use is comparable to anybody else's residential building, because of the legal structure of my building, I have to pay about $180 for 0 gallons of water for my town bills. I pay $90 just for water use, not sewer, but I don't use any more than anybody else. I just pay a lot more. And so I would like to see a more equitable system where everybody pays 1 base rate, and the heavy users pay more, the light users pay less, regardless of however you want to use your water. In the end result, you're using it or you're not. And I think that the costs should be tied directly to the use.
Suzanne. Oh. That's okay.
Talking about tap fee, but I know currently, and I don't know if this is being discussed, that people with separate dwelling units on their property are currently being charged 2 different base rates, even in residential properties, and 2 different trash rates and 2 different sewer rates. So where's the water use rates are actually very minimal. I think the major money that the town is getting for water is from that base rate, and then it's just a few cents on top of it for the water use. So if you have ADUs and you have 2 base rates for property, you're going to be realizing a lot more money than you can with just water use. And that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be the goal, basically. I don't think we should be trying to harvest money. I think we should be providing water, and if we can provide it at cost, that would be optimal, in my opinion.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to discussion of our priorities. And, oh, I'm sorry, Mike, go right ahead.
This is just my 2 cents on our water advisory board. I don't know, I guess I'm not sure we should be responding to whether they should or should not do this, because we're the water advisory board. We're talking about water. My question is similar to the one question. For us to chime in, I think we need to be able to estimate what we think the water use is going to be, because overall, we've got to understand what the water use is in the system. You don't know whether you're going to stress it or not stress it until you know what the volumes are going to be. So, we're looking, to me right now, one of the things that we've been talking about in our whole second meeting here, I guess, is what is the water usage and how does that look over a time frame, and how does that compare to the water availability? And it seems like that's something that's like more important as to whether, to me, that's more important is the water usage and availability than whether they have 2 houses on one property or not. So, I'm done. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I just wanted you to be aware that this is in here. A little discussion I don't think is a bad thing. We're not already talking about how we're going to do this. I just wanted to put this in front of you, let you know that this is going on, and if people ask you questions, yes, we're aware of it. That's really my main intent for putting it on the agenda. Okay. And since you get into the volumes and so forth, let's just move on to the second agenda item, which is discussing all of these priorities we have. And quite honestly, I don't know exactly how this is going to work, and I'm kind of relying on you guys on how you want to see these priorities start to take shape and how we are going to dig in. So if anybody wants to start a discussion on that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, please.
I think we talked about a series of priorities, and kind of like, it's not exactly like, but everybody on our group here has one or more individual priorities that they think is really important, and I have no problem with that. But I think when we lay out our priorities, before we start developing, well, I don't know what you mean, how we're going to develop them. Before we spend too much time on the priorities, I think we need to go to the town council with, these are our priorities, which one
We did do that. I sent you an email on that. I sent everybody an email on that. They looked at it and they said, great, we like it, get to work. So basically we have got, unless I'm misunderstanding, free reign to get in on this. That's why this is the main discussion of the meeting tonight. What are we going to start with? We can't just all be just going out and gathering data and so forth. We've got to have some kind of a plan, and that's what I'm looking for. Is let's start making a plan. Let's hope we can get enough done tonight. One thing I think I do want to make you aware of is the 2 studies that we're waiting on, and I don't have those right off the top of my head. The 2 major studies that are being done that we're going to probably be the main studies that we will use to, that you all will use to look at the moratorium and to look at the, really everything, almost everything in this list of top 10 priorities is going to rely on those studies. But those are both delayed a little bit, and we'll get to those hopefully by sometime in April. Yeah, maybe Corinne could fill us in on that.
So the report that's delayed is JDS Hydro's infrastructure analysis, and it was initially slated for the preliminary draft to be available this week, and it has been delayed to the week of, I believe, April 13th.
But the SGM study, the SGM mapping is on track, is that correct?
The system mapping is pretty much complete. They are making a modification to some of the maps that we wanted to put on the website. And the capital improvement plan, the initial portion that was included in the initial grant application is complete, but they can't submit the final document until they complete the addition of the improvement plan for the sewer treatment plant.
So we need to figure out a way to move forward without those studies at this time, and then once those studies get in, I think, dig in. I don't know, Thomas, you look like you've got some
Yeah,
ideas. I'd love to hear them.
Okay, well, to start, I think that I would like to, we have our list of 10 things, right? Or I guess it might be 11, or 10 is what we brought to the board. I think everybody here has kind of a personal interest maybe in one or two things, you know, in particular. I think we can leave the TAP moratorium for now. Obviously, we're still going to wait on the study. Meanwhile, you know, we have 20 years of previous studies to look through to choose that for my focus. And as part of that, I would like to develop a Paonia, like a conservation policy, say, where we can provide people with information on how to conserve water, and also information on when to conserve water. And I think that this is going to be extremely tricky because I'm going to ask people sometimes not to conserve water. And that will be a really hard sell, I think, for a lot of folks to appreciate or understand. And it's going to, I'll work at it. But basically, when we have water available, when we have abundant water, when we're spilling it, and when it's here, the more we can use, the better it is for our water system's financial health. And this is just a matter of course. It happens across every water system, and it's because they're not flexible in scale. If you look at the use of our water, we have a huge spike in June, you know, and then tapers off. It's a really nice bell curve, basically, a little bit to the left, and skewed to June, basically. So we have a system that's sized for that peak use, and that means that the rest of the year we're underutilizing our system, right? When the water is available. So if we have good flow and we make use of that flow, basically because we're making use of the full system, the financial side of it becomes healthier. Basically, it ends up like more customers in a store, say, right? When there's things to sell, we can sell them. And again, I don't think that you know, we should be in the business of taking money out of town's pocket, but I do think that paying for what we have already purchased can be made, because we still owe what, $3 million on our loan, something like that, for the water system. So we have to pay this back, you know, and to do so, we have to use the water. On the other side of that, when we are in a drought, when resources are limited, we need to know that, and we need to know what to do at that time. And I know that town has some kind of plan in place, but anyway, for my interests, I would like to explore that matter more fully, and I can produce. I'm not sure exactly what our work product is going to be here for all of these items, but I think that we can each, take a couple of things and come up with what we want to produce. So, does that sound like a good plan for that portion of it?
It does to me. How about you guys? Yeah. Look,
The three big areas are supply, and historical records related to that, operations, is our plant structures up? How many gallons of water a day can we finish? These are all basically engineering questions. Thomas is very interested in the demand side. My area of expertise primarily is in operations and mapping, GIS mapping. I'm a huge GIS map fan, and my other interest is in supply. Ultimately, supply predictions will be based on environmental analysis, drought studies, and trying to put together some dynamics up there that don't respond linearly in many areas. So my interest primarily would be, and I think Mike has some as well, in doing some calculations on what our demand is. We actually know quite a bit about our supply system up there. It appears that over the last 10 or 12 years that when the council has not decided what they wanted to do, we did another study. So that actually has been very good for us. And some of the older studies up there, the GEI, Dave Weber did some work back in 2000. There's quite a good bit of data up there. The second issue is that we are in drought in Colorado, have been for 6 or 7 years. It's unclear where this is going. But in the water world, when it comes to yield and trying to figure out what kind of water we have up there, historically, water planners have used the concept of what we call real yield, and the real yield means the amount of water that you have coming out of the mountains up there in 2 years of drought. So we've had a pretty good drought year last year. I think we have some reasonable numbers on what's coming out of the mountain. The second issue up there is understand that the springs and our right to water up there, which is currently 9.9, I think, cubic feet a second. That's the maximum amount that we can draw. Now, we don't know, at least from my readings, how much water we're spilling, and so I have some operations interest, and I'll be asking Travis, and we'll be looking at what kind of spillage rates we have, what kind of incoming rates we have. These are just basic engineering questions, which I think we can answer with some degree of satisfaction. So I guess my statement is I'm interested in that piece. I'm interested in mapping, and I'm interested in operations. So I would be willing to, along with Mike, and however we want to do a division of labor here, to engage in some of those studies. Third piece is, what can you expect out of us? Are we going to have an answer for the council that says we're going to have this much water for this amount of time, and you can draw conclusions based on that? I've often said that engineers change their minds sometimes 3 times a week, and a lot of times looking for I think we'll come up with a target, but I think it's a soft number at the end of the day. So my priorities personally are supply side, mapping, and operations.
Mike, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I better come up with some. Yeah, I'm interested in the supply side, and I'm interested in making sure that anybody paying services for water that we can get the water. So I'll be glad to look at anything and work with both of the two of you on whatever we're doing. That 9.9, I don't know somehow Corinne or somebody sent us this thing, and it's the piece of paper that says Town of Paonia, Colorado, water interest decrees. If you add them up, that comes up to over 9.9. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, wait a minute, that's not 9.9. And yeah, it's like 13 something, you know, and so that's something think we need to, we need to know exactly what decrees we have, and because that doesn't match the 9.9 at all. And on the studies, and this is back to Corinne, and I could have goofed something. But the Wheeler study down at the bottom of the list that when you posted them, the 2004, and one of the other engineering reports above that, and I didn't go back and check, but it's the same report. So it's like the title's different, but the data, the report, when you open it up and look at it, it's the same thing. So there's something went haywire in the process. But so far, I'm completely support what's been said, and I'll be glad to work with both of these guys. I think what they're talking about doing is important.
So it sounds like at this point we need to figure out either in small groups or as a group what data we need, what data the town has, how that can be shared, what Travis knows. I mean, Travis probably has more information than a lot of information we could use, obviously. So I think maybe we need to start figuring out exactly what kind of data you need and how to get that from the town without really stressing the staff. I mean, we can't just like do a core request and ask for all this stuff, because a core request, there is a time limit on that. We need to just be able to put in any requests, see if we can get it, and give reasonable timelines on this. The staff is stressed, and one thing we have to be aware of is that they are very, very busy. But my guess is if we work with them, that they will work with us in getting that data. So why don't we, I don't know, any thoughts on that? And just compiling what kind of data we need, what kind of data is out there. We know that Corinne sent us this whole list of studies and other information. You know, has everybody had a chance to look at that? And then what beyond that would we need?
Well, what Philip just said, and Travis would have the data, and it's got to be archived, but we need to, and maybe one of the studies is going to be looking at it, so maybe the best thing to do is wait till we get the studies, but I'm not sure what the studies are doing. But there should be archival data on, for sure, the amount of water that's going into the processing plants. And if there isn't measurements on the amount of water that's being dumped, I would assume somewhere in the system, the intake system above the water plants, there's got to be measurements of how much water is coming in at the top. And it, from things that I think I've heard Travis say, I think the dump happens just before the water goes into the water plant, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, can you give us some insights on that, Travis?
There's several different places that I dump water throughout the year. I will dump right at the spring box, depending on some of the decrees that we have. If we're not utilizing that water, we have to dump it at the spring box because other people have second decree on it. a lot of it depends on which water I'm using and how much of that water that I'm needing.
Okay, I think we'd like, I guess we'd like to have some kind of a list of here's like you just said, give us a simple write-up of sometimes I take it out here and I dump it here because, and sometimes I dump it here because, and give us an idea of what your process is, and then I'm guessing, Philip, we kind of look at that and then we could come back and give them a better idea of the data we need.
Yeah, I think you need to understand that the water rights administration on our spring ownership is administered by the state engineer. It's totally divorced from CDPHE or everybody else. Second point is that the water commissioner, which is Luke, our commissioner, Luke, I'm not saying. So the question would be to get a hold of the district for water people. They keep records, and I think the citizens need to know that the water measurement up there it's not crude, but it's close to it, because all these tributaries come into a stream and they get run through a partial flume. A measurement is made maybe once a week as to what went through that. If you do an Excel and try and do some mathematics on that, you're going to have wildly large error bars going either way. The other thing is that it's an environmental ecosystem up there, and it responds differently to rainstorms and all that. So data set number one would be to get some data from the water commissioner and possibly Travis, because as things get dry, some of our water gets called out up there, and it has to go to other people, particularly on the Bell Mountain side. So, but I think understanding partial flume reads, looking at Travis, you probably have incoming numbers every day at the plant, and they're recorded. So the combination of looking at partial reads incoming will give us some rough estimation of gallonage. Third question is, how are you going to measure spillage, and that's a tough one because I don't think you don't go up to the spring box every day, I'm sure, right? No, and it's a long ways up there, and it's a messy business to try and get data up there. But I think we can get some reasonably rough numbers. If we have the numbers from last year, which was pretty much a drought year.
Yeah, a lot of it depends. I've only got one skid in each one of my plants that I actually have to waste the water.
Okay.
The backwash water I use finished water in in two of the skids, and that water is actually recycled through another skid. Then that and skid 3 at each plant, that's wasted water.
Right.
So I don't have a lot of
So
wasted
what
water.
do you figure you have 5-6%?
It's less than that.
Really? That's good. Excellent.
I mean,
So,
out of a production between, like, right now I'm producing about 160,000 gallons a day,
right.
and I'm right now those two skids backwash about 5,000 to 6,000 gallons a day, which which naturally would be wasted water, which would be about 3 to 5%.
Yeah.
But that water is recycled, and then that's my skid 3. It only backwashes every 90 minutes of runtime, and it only runs maybe 3 hours a day. So we're probably wasted somewhere between stuff. They both make tremendous great water.
So in terms of looking at the water metrics of supply, the only thing that I found in the late 2000s, early 2000s was, Dave Weber wrote a lot of articles about leaks and stuff, and I was curious if I know you had a repair project on the lower pipeline. So I guess my question to Travis is, what's your assessment of leakage up there?
I'm gonna say our leakage rate is under 20%.
Really, that's good. Do you think that can be improved anywhere, or is it, you have
Oh
the rate?
yeah, I think it can be improved, yes.
So from an operations standpoint, I think we're in reasonably good shape. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So we're left with our committee work really to try and figure out supply. Our operations always need some improvement somewhere along the line, and we're into demand. So it looks to me like Mike and I should work together on the supply side things. I'd be interested in knowing some more details about operations, but I'm not sure that's relevant to this committee. Maybe for my interest and possibly, if we're going to look for some money, possibly to improve operations in the future. The last piece is finance. I'll make two comments on that. We're not supposed to talk about rates, but I just came from a meeting today on rate structure, and it's becoming increasingly apparent that water utilities cannot live on charging people by the gallon. And I would probably take a little issue with Thomas on that one. Most water companies are surviving on tap fees and on base rates. The average rate in Colorado is $65 a month for about 6,000 gallons of usage per tap. So I don't know what your water rates are in the town, but our friends on the Front Range from Denver Public Water, and particularly Aurora, have been in this game a lot longer than we have in terms of finance and how to finance water companies. And I would suggest, Thomas, that in your efforts that maybe, much as we might dislike those people over there, that we reach out to them and see what they've been doing as far as rate structure, because they've been in the game a lot longer than we have. And because I think ultimately it's going to be a combination of how much supply water we got and what kind of money we have. It's going to come down to that. I think our operations are in good shape. Anyway, enough of that.
Those rates should be on the website. One thing I'd like to ask Corinne and Travis, I don't know where he went. I am honestly not real familiar with what JDS Hydro is working on, what this whole study is. Are we looking at some redundancy here, or are they doing something completely different?
From this meeting's conversation, I don't hear a lot of redundancy. That was a concern I had following the last meeting. Because there are definitely, they're evaluating from the springs, all the lines down, how the system operates, all of that. And so I do think that there was, not from tonight, from what everyone's discussing, actually honing in on, I don't see a lot of redundancy.
So can I just ask just briefly what that study is?
Oh, thank you. I can share that with you. I can drop that in the Dropbox if you'd like to see what their accepted proposal was and outlines all the information that they're going to be providing.
That'd be great, thanks. And Thomas, you.
Can I just add one thing to that? One of the biggest things that JDS Hydro doing is making a system model, which is a document that we can always build on, but it does pressure, adequate sizing of lines for the distribution system, and also evaluating the processes in the water treatment plants themselves.
So based on that, the system could be made a lot more efficient. Okay. Okay, Thomas.
Okay, thanks. So to get back to your question regarding data collection, Tammy, I think that basically we can break it down into flows, right? Because I think it just makes sense to measure that. So we have our decree flow, which incidentally, I ran across one of the previous studies had a number for our measured decree flow was 1.3 cubic feet per second. average from 1989 to 1998. This is the GEI 2000 study, which is only 12% of our allowed decree, or the 12% 9.9. You know. But still, 1.3 cubic feet per second was what was actually coming into the lines for that time frame, which I think is a useful statistic. Something I think that 9.9 gets thrown out there a lot, and it's a theoretical limit. You know, it's not a real number, but we do have real numbers. So anyway, the points of flow I think that we should be concerned about are the decree flow, the plant input, the plant output, actual metered use, and the sewer flow. And with those 5 points, we can, I assume this is JDS's model is going to have, you know, some things to look at. But if we have existing data from those, I don't think that would be very useful for us to put more work, like you said, onto these guys to like. We're not going to ask Travis to hike out to the spring twice a day and like, you know, go take his ruler and do all this. But if you guys already have that stuff compiled, that would be, I think, a shoe-in. Anything that is electronically can be automated. You know, if we have update like our SCADA system, if you can send that to Phil and say, here's today's flows, you know, it might be helpful to him to be able to read that if it's not cumbersome to you, basically. You know, we don't want to have you guys doing extra legwork just to serve our curiosity. So if that stuff already exists, or if it can be automated, I think those two components or criteria should probably be where we start. And I don't know what it looks like. Corinne, can you tell us of those 5 that I guess Corinne and Travis, the decree flows, the plant input, the plant output, the metered use, and the sewer flow? Of those 5, are any of those already measured? Is there a compiled historic data that we could get?
How many years back do you want to go?
How many you got? I mean, before it becomes inconvenient, because like we don't want, like if it's on paper, maybe we can, you know, you can hand a book off to us. If it's you got to go find it, don't worry about it. You know, what's convenient for you guys? How far back do you think you can go?
JDS just asked me for the last 3 years.
3 years?
So okay. I've got quite a bit of that information already gathered.
Okay.
Because that's JDS Hydro has, I mean, it's same information that
Perfect.
they asked for.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So
As far as meter, of course, we have the meters, and our system says 5 years.
okay.
Which begs the question, should we just wait on this till the JDS study comes out, or?
I would say that question's dependent upon if you want to see the raw data, because this is going to be their evaluation and assessment of the data. And so if you want to see that engineering assessments evaluation, yes, but if you want to see the raw data to come to your own conclusions, then.
Well, one of the charges in the ordinance was for us to review data, not necessarily invent it, because we're just a bunch of volunteers here. So the question is, we don't want to overreach on the data, but if it's going to be 2 or 3 months and we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs, that's probably not going to be sufficient. So I guess the question is, should we wait on this till the JDS stuff comes out, or how hard is it going to be for you to get it?
Some of it's easily accessible and we can upload it, and other reports and things that were given are not. And so I'll be happy to upload what we have accessible onto the Google folder that we have.
Well, thank you. That would give us something to at least start on.
Right.
Mike?
I'm going back to what you said about the report, and this is, I guess the way to say it is when I did a big study in reports, I would boil things down and give specific notes. This is what I learned here, this is what I learned there. But I'd always compile the data and put it in the appendix. So what you're saying is that you gave them a lot of data and you don't think they're going to give it back to you as an appendix on the report? Okay. Oh, and this is, my wife keeps reminding me this all the time, so I'll simply remind all of you, just because you've got 9.9 or 13 point whatever water rights doesn't mean it's available. So, it just depends.
Question for staff. The town should have a copy of the filing rights with the water commissioner. I mean, in other words, the question of whether it's 9.9 or 8.6 is easily found out by looking at the original water filing. So would the town attorney have that? Does the town have a water attorney? Do we need to get an opinion from the water attorney that this is what we own? What do you think?
I believe the town did that several years ago, and I don't know that it was transferred to our town attorney when our previous attorney left, but I know that we have those files.
So those would be awfully nice if you could find those and upload those as well. Thank you.
And while we're making document requests, I was reading the GEI 2000 study, and it appears to be missing many pages. Do we have an original hard copy of that?
Corinne just sent me an email. That was today. I do have an original copy.
Okay.
I just haven't had a chance to get to my office to get it down to her.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. And in that document, they reference other studies in the 1990s. Do we have copies of those?
It's iffy. I can look,
Right.
but there was a lot of materials that were well beyond the retention schedule that were destroyed several years ago. So I cannot guarantee that we have them.
Wow, okay. And I suppose that the same is true for the treatment flow data source from that study. They have a couple of charts in there that are like clearly direct draws of data sources. And I was wondering if that would be easily accessible as well.
I will have to dig through some archives. I'm not guaranteeing that because
Right.
I know the operator that worked the town before I did, and the previous one before him, probably when those studies were done, everything was done on desk calendars.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah, and it could have been, you know, I don't know if it was an actual database at that point, or if it was somebody writing numbers down and they just compiled it for the study. That's what I'm asking.
I believe it was just compiled
Okay.
for the study.
Okay. Cool. And yeah, those are my document questions. And one more. Do we have a copy of the agreement with Arch Coal for the unused water taps? Okay. Can we get that on there as well? And that's it for documents from me. Do we need a motion to bring to the board, Tammy, for data collection, or what like should ask for all this, formalize it, or do you want to just, I don't know how,
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't see why. I mean, making requests is not something we have to get approval from the board to do, especially
Okay.
since we're all sitting here from this committee. I'm sorry.
Right.
No, I'm gonna say no.
Question. On the issue of Arch coal taps, I again don't live in Paonia, but I understand there's other outstanding taps as well. The Arch coal taps number 317, did I read where there's some Hidden Valley taps, about 80 of those? I mean, what is our actual overhang as far as liabilities for taps?
And I did, somebody told me about some water certificates. It's my understanding all those water certificates are null and void at this point. Yeah. So any outstanding water certificates are not good. So I think that was Christina. Any other discussion on data that we need? Okay. I would like to dig into the water company agreements and start thinking about maybe spring, summer, trying to meet with some of these water companies and hear them out and see what their thoughts are. I don't know if those water company agreements are easy to get, easy to access. Okay, wonderful. I would put these guys before that, but that's something I would like to have. And grants and loans, I should remember this. Do we have any lines on any grants right now that are possible? And if so, where would I look for those? And I am not a grant writer. I helped to write a couple grants, but I've never written a grant. But be willing to give it a stab.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Those closed on the 12th.
Is that an annual cycle then? Okay.
I've written a couple of grants, and I don't want to write any right away. So the thing that I think the town should be thinking about, every June, there are several sources of money. The Srf funding, which is available from CDPHE, comes up every year. But they have a thing called the IUP, so in the June of every year, you have to submit an intent to do a project and to borrow money the following year. So one of the things that I think, this is already March, one of the things I think we should come up with is some opportunities or some engineering plans that we can at least roll around in our head and go ahead and put our name on the list for potential money next year. Srf funding is about $20 million a year. It's run through CDPHE. The grant app process is tedious, annoying, but there is some money available, particularly since Paoni has had some difficulties with violations and others. Sometimes you get moved to the top of the list, sometimes not. So I might ask Travis and others, the monies available could be for engineering studies, for example, rate studies. They could be available for just about anything you could think of. One thing that comes to mind for me would be some remote monitoring stations, possibly set up at the Parshall Flumes, be satellite-based. A lot of water companies are struggling with the same problems we do, and we're looking for source data. I haven't been up there, but that would be an example of something. Probably $10,000 per station put on each of those Parshall Flumes, something like that. I don't know. That would need to be integrated into your SCADA system so that we can actually monitor our resource. We're kind of flying blind here and making some decisions that will be epic in the future if we don't get it right. Areas of finance, something that like in a demand management system. Do we need more infrastructure monitoring points in the distribution system? And I think we should think seriously how we could possibly spend $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever the number is, and just be ready to apply for it next year. Other sources of funding are USDA funds. There's quite a bit of money out there for projects. They tend to like more major projects. If we, for example, wanted to fix the 20% of the leaks that Travis was talking about, we would need some engineering on that. So my point to all this is that I think every year we should have something in the hopper that we want to do to improve our infrastructure. And yeah, CWCB will only fund raw water projects improvements. So I would suggest that maybe in this meeting or the next meeting, anybody can think of anything they need done, we should put it on a list and then consider doing some engineering and possibly a grant app next year.
Cindy?
So I hate to interrupt and add some information, but the problem with those grants is that they require matching funds, and we at this time don't have matching funds.
Could that be built into the budget for next year? Again, 10% matching funds on a $100,000 grant for engineering?
Currently, we are trying to just get enough matching funds or enough to line the 2 million gallon tank. That is a requirement that must be completed within 2 years.
Apologies, I thought that was done already.
It was at one plant, but not the other. One tank is lined, but the other one was not. And we did budget this year for the engineering for raw water storage, and we're intending to look at funding for actual implementation of the engineered plan once that's completed.
Mike?
On the grant stuff, and I don't know if Philip said this, but rural development has grants also for small rural water companies. And Tammy, I'd be glad to work with you on proposals. I spent my career, well, once I started working for them, then they basically said, if you don't feed yourself, you don't have a job. So I got pretty good at writing proposals.
And I would just like to turn to staff and say, what, if we do see a grant, what process do you want us to take to get approval to apply for that or to work, should anything come up? What, is that something that's done administratively? Does that have to come before the board?
In the past, we've never had to take grant applications to the board. We could just apply for them, and then if we got them, then that's when we would bring them to the board for approval.
Right. I would add, though, that I think the first thing to be really aware of is looking to see what kind of matching funds requirement there is, and in kind, so that when we're applying, the thing, we don't want to apply for grants that we know we're not going to be able to have the budget for the matching funds. So that would be a big part of the picture I would be looking at.
Mike?
Well, Corinne, you just said it. You stole my thunder. But in kind helps go towards that matching, and you've got 3 or 4 people here that would be doing in kind work if we helped to get the thing going and we did some management or monitoring or whatever. So you got to always remember that, because I was working with Stewart Mesa Irrigation Company, and we were putting together a proposal from them to go with, ultimately they were going with get into a BOR program, and we started by saying, here's this BOR program, and we went to CWCB and said, we're going after $1.5 million from BOR, but we need some money from you to help us get that. And then I got to talking to the guys that were running the dish company, and I said, "Are you guys going to be managing it?" And they said, "Yes." And you're not going to charge them. You're not going to. You're going to do that. You're not going to get paid to do that because you don't get paid to do it because you're on the board of the ditch company anyhow, right? I said, "Yeah." Okay, we got to use that. Are you gonna give them space to park all of the pipes and stuff for the ditching project? And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, about how many acres?" And they said this many acres. And in your hay fields, how much do you make per acre on your hay fields? So there's a lot of ways to get in kind if you think about the whole process. So I'm done.
Any other comments on what we've been talking about? And grants and loans, yeah.
I have one other comment. I met today with, Town of Paonia is a member of the Colorado Rural Water Association, are we not? So I met today, with Scott Thomas, who's the, what they call them, circuit riders, and, do you know Scott? Has he been around? And he told me today there was quite a bit of, money out there, and in some cases to get over the 10% problem or cost share. And in some cases you can piggyback loans. You can piggyback a DOLA on top of a SRF. So I fail to understand why you can't budget 10 or 15% for a future cost share on next year's budget. Because the fact of the matter is, if you want to improve your infrastructure, you're going to have to save some money. They just don't give you money free these days. So that would be my only other comment.
Do you want to comment on that, or? Yeah, okay. We have less than 15 minutes left. I'm wondering if, I don't know anything about demand management. I never got around to that video, and I'm wondering if, Thomas, you can just briefly describe, I think I know what it is, but can you just briefly describe what demand management is?
I'll Google it.
I could do that too.
So water demand management is a management approach that aims to conserve water by influencing demand. That is, we don't necessarily say, we just treat the supply as a black box. We say, okay, water's coming in, what can we do? It's essentially conservation, but it's not necessarily, as I mentioned before, reducing water use. It's making most effective use of the water that's available. And it is a huge topic right now. There are, as we know, the Interstate Water Compact is being renegotiated. We have effects of it up on the hill here, and there is a group in the Western Slope, or I guess that affects the Colorado River Basin, and their focus is largely agricultural, because agriculture is such a heavy use, but the meetings are happening now where policy is taking form regarding how we can make the best use of the water that we still have available. And essentially the crux of their policy will be it'll be voluntary, transparent, and temporary are their keywords that they enforce a lot. And this is well beyond the scope of what we're going to be up to here. But basically what they're trying to avoid is the curtailment of water rights for Colorado users. And whether that takes form as a trade system, where somebody gives up their use for a certain amount, or if it's a compensation for installation of more effective sprinklers, or however that happens, like whatever comes about, it all kind of falls under the phrase demand management. And for our uses, I think that'll be obviously a lot more domestic, and Paonia's shown in the past to be extremely resilient and very effective at saving water when we need to be. And I think that it just speaks to the power of community, you know, when everybody understands that this is a natural resource that is limited, you know, it's renewable, but limited in its flow. So we just need to make as effective use of it as we can. So I guess for our final few minutes, I do have a couple of things from our last meeting. Did we ever figure out if we were allowed to meet individually or as like a group? Like, okay, cool. So we can get together for beers or whatever and talk this stuff over outside of the meeting, right? Yes.
I would probably have you guys do that. I mean, I would like to meet with Mike and talk grants. I mean, just talk process, you know, but, you know, reminding the public too that we can't just make change, you know. We are not the ones who make the final decisions. We are advisory in nature, and, you know, we just have to remember that. And don't be making a bunch of plans and thinking you're going to do that and not bringing it back to the group and in many cases to the board. So
right. Yeah, I think my concern is more with time frame. You know, if we
yeah.
only see each other once a month, it's really hard to get stuff done. You know, email dialogue is useful, but the fact that you know, we don't, you know, we have conversations, phone conversations occasionally, but I think, you know, a more frequent meeting or ad hoc meetings would be more productive rather than waiting for months between seeing each other.
Absolutely. I think those are very productive too. I mean, you can brainstorm a lot of stuff in those sessions.
Right.
So, yeah. Philip.
A lot of good information out there. Possibly it would be useful to have him come and explain, and we're all kind of engineering minds here, explain to us what, you know, was going on at that point in time. Is that something we could do? Would it be
Just keeping in mind we don't have a budget. If he's willing to come speak with us, I think it'd be great.
I could maybe convince him to pay him on another project down there.
And just kind of wrapping it up, anything from the staff? Any comments? Anything? Just last chance to comment? No? Travis?
Travis, I'd like to have you scratch down on a piece of paper or a yellow notepad or something, maybe 10 of the things that you would like to see done in this system. In other words, it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be remote sensing in the upper flues. It could be I need 9 more control points in the distribution system. It could be I need 2 miles of pipe replaced. I wonder if you could just give me a hit list of very simple things that you think would improve operations. Could you do that?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right. Thank you.
Any final comments from the public? Suzanne, you got to be quick.
About money, so Mary Bachman was talking about the American recovery money or something with this pandemic, and it was supposed to be for infrastructure, and it was 75, we could get 75% of our pre-pandemic annual budget in the form of a grant. And I just wanted to put this information in front of you, and maybe Tammy, if you could get with Mary and see if it could be used somehow for our water system as a money source. Thanks.
Bill?
thank everybody for putting your time in on this. This is a really good project, and thanks a lot. As far as having somebody that's familiar with current or existing studies come and talk, if somebody made the suggestion to the board and the board was into having them come down, even if it cost a couple $100 to have them come down for an evening, I think it'd pack a house with the public interested in hearing that. I personally have been asking for that for years. So I think it's a great idea. But thank you very much.
Thomas?
Yeah, before we go, I just Sorry, I'll say that again. I was just wondering when we'd be able to expect something that describes the scope of the data that you guys would be able to retrieve without too much work.
Right now is probably looking at like that second week in April.
Second week in April?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And do we have, I know we talked about the plant flows, history, what about the meter flows and the sewer flows? Do we have those that are digital as well? Okay, cool, thank you.
Okay, I am going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, sorry, are you just wanting an average daily flow for sewer?